am George Knapp, listening to that UFO podcast and having one hell of a good time.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to that UFO podcast. My name is Andy, and this is another listener call-in / email show for December 2024. This one is after Christmas, so I hope you've all enjoyed a nice festive period, and it's closing in on the new year as well. 2025 is just around the corner. What I'm going to do with this one, folks, is we've got a couple of calls lined up, both from listeners in the US, and I've also got some emails from you. I'm going to start off with the emails and then share my thoughts on those, and then we'll crack on with the calls. Because what I was thinking, now I'm doing more emails and people are writing in and asking me to read stuff out on the show, when I do these, they're not just a call-in, so anyone got a good name you can think of for this particular, pod? If it's the listener call-in, doesn't quite work, but any cool ideas would be more than welcome, folks. Like I say, this is the listener's show, so there we go. So first off, I had Josh. Josh says, I wanted to share a thought about disclosure. I've always imagined disclosure as a single undeniable moment. But what if it's not? What if it's more like the old philosophical idea of gradually replacing parts of a ship until it's entirely new? There's no single point where you can definitively say the transformation occurred. It just becomes apparent one day that the ship is completely different. Maybe disclosure is happening like that. Over time, through small adjustments, leaked information, shifting cultural acceptance and scientific validation, we find ourselves living in a world where non-human intelligence is widely accepted, but there's no singular event we can point to and say, that's when it happened. This approach seems like the least disruptive way for the powers that be to handle it. Maybe we're already in the middle of it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for the work you do. Best, Josh, out in Michigan. Josh, awesome. Thank you so much for that. So I've not written anything down here. I'll just kind of spitball off the top of my head. I can see this being a pretty reasonable way for disclosure to happen. And yeah, folks might say disclosure's happened. And I think for the individual, you might think that. For me, I don't need disclosure because I've seen what I've seen. I've heard from so many people doing this podcast. I've watched so many documentaries. I've watched or listened to or read so many books. It just, disclosure for me has happened already. But I think in the grand scheme of things, there is a disclosure that needs to happen for the human race, for general society, for the public, and I suppose for a lot of folks even listening to this, that official confirmation, if that's the best way of putting it potentially. The idea of drip feeding this information, I think, is spot on. I've said so many times, but if you look back at the last 7 years since 2017, we are now at, just past the 7-year anniversary of that New York Times article. So much has happened, and people look back and say, well, it's slow, or it's been a quiet month, or there is so much information now that has come out, so many people that have come forward. Sure, there might be a lot of BS or nonsense, and amongst that we have to sift through, and there's been folks come forward who may be less reputable. There may be folks who we see now as, the standard bearers that maybe fall by the wayside as the journey goes along. But that core story, that core information that's still coming out, the core progress that's been made, the hearings that have happened, whether you loved the most recent one or not, whatever it may be, these things have still happened and are huge milestones along the way that if you are Joe Q Public, who say in 2025 we get that official confirmation, I've used many times the idea the James Webb Telescope finds life or signs of life on another planet, and say we announce that in 2025, folks then start to look at this whole UFO phenomenon to say, is there something out there? You just have to then point them in the direction of the last couple of years and go, actually, all the information for you to catch up is already there. And that's not just, great if people go listen to this podcast in the back archive, the back catalogue, but just the YouTube clips, the TikTok clips, the Instagram, the articles, the blogs, all the other podcasts, documentaries, everything's there for people to catch up as much or as little as they want. So yeah, for me, I like the idea that it has been kind of almost an under the radar, pardon the pun for the UFO topic, disclosure that's happened for most folks. And I think, honestly and reasonably, that's the way this has to happen for the masses. The idea that we could just announce aliens tomorrow, I don't think it works like that. It's far too difficult to do that. So Josh, great point. That's my idea. If anyone has anything different, please send it in. I'll read it out on the next listener email, call-in show, whatever it may be. Just email in UFOUAPAM@gmail.com, because these are going to be much more frequent going forward. You'll be glad to hear. And if you're not glad to hear that, don't listen. But no, please do. David also got in touch. David says, I've never written to you before, but I felt strongly compelled to share my thoughts about the current state of the UFO UAP topic, particularly after listening to your recent interview with Tim from The Debrief and being careful of people just trying to sell popcorn. I've been following this subject for some time, and while I deeply value open discussions, I'm growing increasingly frustrated with the bold predictions and unverified claims being made by various commentators and podcasters in this space. For instance, one podcast I recently listened to was full of wild claims about how monumental events would unfold in 2025. As a long-time fan of that show and its presenter, I found myself losing faith and after hearing such unsupported speculation. This trend seems to be pervasive. Another well-known podcast I enjoy often pushes similar grandiose predictions while simultaneously selling popcorn. While I admire the hosts, it's becoming harder to trust their statements when nothing substantial ever materialises. The lack of accountability within the community is troubling. Take, for example, claims about imminent disclosure. Stephen Bassett suggested it would happen in the first 60 days of the next Trump administration. When these predictions inevitably fall flat, who holds the individuals making these statements accountable? It feels like anyone can make bold proclamations without consequence, leading to a cycle of hype and disappointment. Let me be clear. I do believe in the reality of UAPs and the possibility of a non-human intelligence. However, I also believe the powers that be will do everything they can to keep this information hidden until undeniable proof, like a UFO landing on the White House lawn, occurs. It becomes increasingly hard to engage with this topic in a meaningful way. Anyway, I really enjoyed the podcast and your breakdowns. I appreciate the breakdowns you provide. Your content offers a balanced perspective. I hate reading out the nice stuff people write, so thank you very much for saying that, David, and you look forward to more episodes in the new year. Listen, David, I'm not going to disagree with you, and everyone's going to have different opinions on various different YouTube shows, podcasts, blogs, influencers, people who just put out content, whatever it may be, so I can't judge in that way, because I do that, and there will be folks who don't like what I do, which is totally fine. They're wrong, but that's fine. No, I jest. So I get what you're saying about grandiose claims. That's why whenever I've heard any information, I'm sure many of you would be quite happy for me to come on here and say, "Oh, I've heard this," and then I don't think it makes much difference, because there are so often you can only either spread rumor, which turns out to be false or it doesn't happen, or say I'm told something that turns out to be true. Then you're holding back information, or it turns out something changes last minute. I'd rather just sit back and comment and commentate on what happens and what is out there, and share my opinion. That's why I enjoy doing this. It doesn't need to be for rumour or speculation or gossip mongering. However, I'll be really clear. I do enjoy in this topic. I have always enjoyed the speculation. I enjoy the rumour. Just a few weeks ago on my Facebook memories, it came up where Obama was allegedly announcing, aliens disclosure. That this goes back 7 or 8, 9, 10 years on my Facebook, and I laughed and I was like, God, if only I knew then what I know now. So for those involved in the topic for decades and years, disclosure's always around the corner, and that'll be a frustration for a lot of folks. But there are many, many folks newer to the topic, and we don't know that maybe next year is the year. I know Bassett, you mentioned, speaking to me, that he feels disclosure may very well happen in that first 60 days. Stephen's incredibly passionate about the topic. He's been involved in it for so many decades, and he is very enthusiastic. I do sit more on the fence, and I'm more pessimistic with a lot of this stuff. But when you say who's to hold these individuals accountable, I'll be the first one to ask Stephen to come back on and talk about that. And we know what the conversations may sound like, but I've learned you've got to be able to disagree and appreciate, just by the very nature of the UFO topic, claims will be made, many will fall flat, we don't know. I do feel we're at a place where a lot of progress has been made. So if ever there was a time where perhaps we were going to get a level of disclosure or true progress or true disclosure, then maybe now would be the time. I don't know. The world's not in the greatest of places, is it, right now? But who knows? And I'm just checking through here, David, skimming if I answered everything else. But listen, I'm glad you enjoy this and appreciate a balanced perspective. It's what I like to offer. It keeps me grounded. I'm just sharing my thoughts and opinions that I think a lot of you listening to this would share similarly. And if you disagree, I love hearing that as well, because that's how I personally tend to learn a lot in life, as well as listening to everyone's point of view and trying to make up and make my own opinion malleable and as I kind of go along. So I love listening to rumor, speculation, but I put it in a little box and I kind of blend it up myself, and my own opinion gets formed from that. You can still enjoy that stuff. I think there are a lot of great podcasts right now with people doing a lot of really good work. And while not all the information tends to lead somewhere, some of it does. And I think when we look back, it only takes a couple of home runs to really land massive punches in the UFO topic as well. But we do live in an age where content for any topic is plentiful, and just you listening to this is I'm very grateful for, because there's a lot of great options out there. So yes, do enjoy, do listen to a plethora of different things, folks, but make up your own mind as always. So thank you for that, David. I've got a few more emails and stuff I'll keep for another podcast. I'm doing an end of year podcast if you want to send in your highlights and lowlights and everything. But if you want involved in this new listener call-in / email show, then please let me know if you want to call in. We'll arrange a call like Dalia and Regis. You're about to hear both of those. Or if you want me to read out an email and answer on here, send that in via email, UFO UAP AM. But we're going to hand over first to Dalia. Dalia, regular caller, always wonderful to hear from as well, folks. So thank you very much for listening. And joining me now on the podcast from out in Washington, I have the president of Chickenlandia, Dalia. Welcome back, Dalia. How are you?
I love that you introduced me that way, even though this is a UFO.
Yeah, that's
that
like
UFO podcast.
That's a huge title and responsibility. So, Dalia,
It is.
very quickly, is it chickenlandia.com?
Welcome to chickenlandia.com. And
There you go.
for those of you wondering, I'm a backyard chicken educator.
There you go. For people who may not have heard Dalia before on the listener call, and you've been on a few times now, but like you say, you are here to talk UFOs, Dalia. So what is on your mind this time? The floor is yours.
So I want to talk about disclosure. I'm sure no one's ever talked about that on your show before.
First time.
There is one thing that bothers me, and it's been bothering me over the years about this conversation that kind of surrounds disclosure. And there is a part of the conversation, and this might be, I mean, I think it's actually like a coping mechanism that we have. And I've heard it a lot. And this is like, I'm not judging anybody that needs to have this part of the conversation. But honestly, it makes me kind of sad when I hear people talking about disclosure and they're asking the question, how would humanity handle it, and how should disclosure happen? Should it kind of like trickle down to us? Should we be told and slowly? Should they just tell us all at once? And that bothers me because it's almost like we're asking permission to know the truth. And as human beings, I think we're entitled to that truth, whatever our reaction to it is. As anyone on Earth, if aliens or if UFO lands or whatever, and they make contact with us, we all have a right to that experience and that information, regardless of how we're going to react to it. And I don't think that necessarily we would react to it by running through the streets and freaking out and, killing each other and all that stuff. I think that's kind of been fed to us, that is how we would react. And so we, the powers that be have to be careful about how that information is given to us. But I don't think that's necessarily true. In fact, it could actually be the opposite, where it could encourage us as a species to stop hurting each other, to stop killing each other, to stop oppressing each other. But the very few people on Earth that already have access to the information would not benefit from that. And so I don't know, it's like this idea of what would humanity do with this? And I'm
Mm.
always like, humanity already has this information. It's just a very small subset of humanity that has it. So the information is here. It's already being dealt with. I mean, I should say that presumably, however you pronounce that word.
Close enough, yeah. I'll give you that, yeah.
I think most of us that are within this space can acknowledge that there is information out there from another place, that there is something out there from another place, and that there are some people on this planet that have that information. On whatever level, they might not have all the information, they might not have all the answers, but they have something.
Yeah.
So humanity already has that. So it's not a matter of asking like, well, how would humanity react to it? We're already reacting to it. It's just a small group of people who, in my opinion, happen to be, uh, historically not very responsible with us, with our planet,
Yeah.
and with people in general. So I just want to kind of change the conversation where we're acknowledging, you know what, this information belongs to us. We don't need to, we shouldn't have to ask for it. It shouldn't be, the conversation shouldn't be around whether or not we are as a species are responsible to handle it. It's just that it belongs to us. The message, whatever that is, belongs to us, from the poorest person on earth to the wealthiest person on earth. It belongs to all of us. So that's what I'm feeling today. And I had a whole thing where I was going to like really organize my thoughts very well, and it all just went out the window.
No, you've put that across really nicely. I've sat with my post-it note making notes
Okay,
as you've
good.
kind of gone along. So, um, questions like how should disclosure happen and how would humanity handle it? Okay, I tend to I obviously discuss those just given the nature of what I do, right?
Yeah.
However, as a species, like where we are right now, so if you want to call this us humanity, you're talking about everyone on the planet, like you say, from the richest person to the poorest, person, whatever, in terms of wealth, knowledge, whatever that may be. Are we ready for it, or even in a place to deal with that realization? And I don't mean the small percentage of humanity that listen to this podcast, or that listen to Need to Know, or Weaponized, or watch documentaries, or subscribe to Gaia, or whatever it might be in terms of how they consume that UFO knowledge. Okay, there's a lot of folk that do, but are people actually ready for the kids sit down, your mum and dad are getting a divorce chat? You saw it coming. You knew they weren't happy, things weren't going well. Dad's not been living at home for a while now, but they're finally telling you.
Yes.
There's a difference there, and I do wonder, like, we've been through COVID and what that reaction was to an incident like that, particularly in the West. If we had that moment, that genuine, okay, it's out in the open now, would we be ready for that and what that would entail?
Well, I don't want to get too deep into this politically, because unfortunately COVID became very political.
100%.
And I think that was the problem with it. I think it wasn't what we were being told, it's what we felt like we weren't being told,
Would this be any
how it was
different, Dalia?
used. Well, yeah. I mean, I think ultimately it just has to do, like, we just have to know the truth, however we're going to handle it. And if we're given the truth, the full truth, then we can do with that what we will. But I think, if the truth is held by a few people, if it's politicalized, if it is used to, or politicized, if it's used to turn us against each other, then that's where the problem is. And that comes from a few people having the information and giving it to us.
I think this would be a far, far bigger politicized issue than COVID or an Iraq war, WND situation, whatever you want to go back over time. Because you imagine whatever president is sitting in the office, US or otherwise, and we always go with the US, don't we? And they come out and say we're not alone. Yeah, we're being visited by a non-human species. No matter what they say, you're going to have people saying, I believe them. You'll have people saying, I don't believe them. If they come out and say, we know where they're from, we know at least one species or two species, we have some technology, but we don't know, blah, 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 blah. Loads of people will go, well, that don't believe you. That's not true. Of course they know. And then you'll get people saying, why are they saying aliens? Do you believe them? Yeah, it's probably not aliens, is it? It's probably something else. So even wheeling out the bodies on the White House lawn, I think you would still have a subsection of people who would be like, nah, don't believe them. And I
Yeah,
just think
I
it
mean,
would
I
be a
think that's
complete the camps, honestly, Dalia, I think it would be so fractured when that does happen.
well, I think that comes from how that information is being funneled. Like if it was a direct contact with us, if we formed, and I don't even here I am just like I have no idea what the answers are. But what I wish is that we didn't have to go through this small subset of people to get our information. And we
Yeah.
started working on systems where we had just we were trying to make direct contact, not through these people, but just as human beings. And we
What
could
would
receive it
be
that way.
what's your ideal scenario then? What for you would be, because I don't think there's any perfect scenario, like you say. There's always going to be some level of politicization, industrialization. There'll be monopolies of technology, insurances, all that kind of stuff. The most boring minutiae that we deal with now in life will have some element to play in the UFO disclosure or reality, right? Like you
Yeah.
say, insurance. No one likes dealing with insurance, but you will have insurance for abductions and close encounters. That will
Oh
happen. That
no.
it will.
No,
It's like
that's
it's just it will seriously happen. Was that
oh my
who was it I
God.
was speaking to recently? Or someone mentioned about it was on James Fox's program, wasn't it? Where Hal Puthoff said he'd been in a talk where they basically had this think tanker group where they were asked to run through all these different things that they would have to deal with in the likely event of disclosure. And it would be things like, and I can't remember who I spoke to recently, and they mentioned, if Lockheed Martin has been given material by the US government and we get disclosure, that would then involve lawsuits from other companies, because why has Lockheed Martin been given material by the government to work on that gives them an advantage over other companies? And this is like boring stuff that a lot
Yeah.
of folks won't care about, but it's reality because that would happen. So anyway, back to my question: what's your ideal scenario that you think would best play out the disclosure process?
It's really hard for me to imagine that because I think part of what needs to happen is we need to stop looking at this in a very like human being way, because the reality is that it could be something that we can't even really imagine, and so we don't really know what our response to it would be. And in fact, I often wonder, I'm like, has it already happened and we're already just becoming moving into this new phase where we have a relationship with something else, you know?
This is the acclimatization period now, and it's
Yeah. Yeah. And that it will be, I don't want to give too much away. And I thought, what is the name of the book with the spiders? Oh gosh, it's such a good book. Something Time, Children of Time.
okay.
And if you haven't read the book, oh, I don't know how to do this without making a big spoiler. So if you're reading the book or if you want to read the book, go read it and
Just
then
say
come back.
spoilers, yeah. Say spoiler.
There's a spoiler. It's the spiders have become intelligent on another planet, and this is very far into the future. And humans are they come in contact with the spiders, and they're of course terrified. But the spiders have this knowledge and they give it to the humans in a way that seems that the people are very scared, but all of a sudden they have an understanding of something greater.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that they just got this evolution through this experience, and then all of a sudden they understood it.
So everyone
So
gets it. Like,
yeah,
it's just implanted that you wake up and everyone's got this little bit of.
yeah, we have this understanding. And so, maybe it would be something like that where we just have an understanding of something else that we couldn't comprehend before, and that's what it means to communicate with these other beings that have contacted us. Um but I mean, ultimately I keep going back to, we have this idea, this very like human idea of how we would respond to this, and I think we've really been influenced to believe we would respond to it in a certain way, in an irresponsible way, in a crazy way, be throwing toilet paper at each other or whatever we're going to be doing.
Yeah.
And I think we need to kind of shift our mentality about that. And also start to think, hey, as we start to believe, guess what? This information belongs to all of us. Nobody should be putting barriers between this information and the rest of humanity. And when we kind of shift our mentality that way, maybe the smartest people, not me, smart people, will begin to create their own avenues to get that information. And there is some out there, but it's not like, I just really think everything is kind of connected with governments and whatnot. And I don't really think that's the best way to go. I actually don't think it's a safe way to move forward, considering the level of responsibility that most of these people have, and when they think about aliens and alien technology and all that, what are they thinking of it for?
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie Dream Scenario? Nicolas Cage.
I haven't.
It
I
only
have.
came out last year. I went to see it in the cinema. Really like straight laced dark comedy, but it's like he's a really boring plain teacher, and overnight millions and millions of people start dreaming about him. And like
That's
some
pretty
of the
cool.
dreams are really mundane, like very, very he's just there, like in the corner in the room, they waves at you. Or it might be one of those horrible dreams where you're being chased down the road by like a monster, but he's at the side of the road just like nodding. So he's just like there. It's not as if he's anyone special. And it's how the populace deal with, and it's like a comedy fantasy horror. I'm just double checking it here. It's not a horror, actually. It says it's a horror, but it's not. But it's how the populace deal with this guy and this weird phenomenon of dreaming about this random person who's a nobody, and then how he deals with it. That's a separate thing. But there's that idea of, could another intelligence manipulate everyone's dreams, that over the course of a couple of days, everyone has the same dream?
Maybe they've always been in our dreams.
Maybe that's we get proper. That's the reality, Dalia. That is reality. This is the dream. Like,
Yeah.
it starts
I
to get
mean,
a
we
bit trippy.
really we really don't know. I just want us to kind of move out of this mentality of like, it's almost like we're asking permission for this experience, when it's our birthright as human beings to have the experience. If aliens come down to talk to people, that means us. That means all of us. And so that's just what I would like to see, is a shift in how we have that conversation and how we're looking at it, and kind of a deprogramming um of all this idea that it would be mass hysteria and that we would immediately turn against each other. I actually don't think that's true. And there's probably a lot of guys out there laughing at me right now, like, oh, come on, like I'm a an optimist. But generally, if you take like one group of people and you put something that is very strange or anomalous or whatever, or shocking, into that group, all of the group will turn and look at it at once, like, and they will, either be afraid, or try and help each other or whatever. I think that's more human nature
Yeah.
than suddenly we just start killing each other because we find out that there's aliens. Like I just don't think that's going to happen. But I could be wrong.
Yeah. I
and if so, I'll say, oops.
Yeah. I think regardless what I think, it's going to be different to what we all believe, I'd imagine, when it does eventually happen.
Yeah.
And it could be something, though, that is over 10, 20 years. And I know some listeners who may be on the older side of time who get in touch with me sometimes who are hoping for it in the next couple of years might not like to hear that. It could be tomorrow. It could be in the next decade. It could be, we could be sitting here in our 80s, Dalia, on another listener call in 2070, 2080, still saying that. Still not, I'm being really generous on myself saying 2080, I'll be 80, Christ. But we could still be here, but we just have to kind of take that as it comes, don't we?
Yeah.
I want to know from you, though, before we wrap up, it's really interesting stuff to think about there, and people will be thinking about that, and I'd love to hear people get in touch about it, what you've said. What are your kind of hopes for the year going forward? Realistically, do you see any kind of progress, any kind of momentum, any revelations on the horizon?
I hope that the evolution that I feel is already happening, I hope it continues. And we've gotten ourselves as a species into some really dark times. Like we're in some really, really dark times. And I hope that we can, with that evolution, begin to see our way out of it. Because I don't think, one thing that I feel pretty strongly about is that, if we can't get along with each other, then sorry, that's my husband's
That's all right.
he's ruining my profound thought.
Yeah, right in the moment, your big moment there.
Yes. uh you know we need to figure out how to deal with each other, and then I think we'll be more able to deal with something else beyond ourselves. And maybe those out there in the universe will feel that we're responsible enough to handle that. That being said, it's kind of like, what will come first? I don't know. Like, will we evolve first into being able to handle it and being able to understand it? Or will we come to that understanding, and then because of that we're able to we're able to handle it? But regardless of how it's handled, I just want us to always remember that as human beings, it belongs to us. The truth belongs to us. It doesn't just belong to some people. It belongs to all of us.
Do you know what I love, Dalia? Wonderful call, but you sort of finished on a what comes first, the chicken or the egg analogy. You just went the other way with
The
it.
T-Rex.
The T-Rex did come first, yeah. But listen, Dalia, really great call, really great thoughts, and I'd love to hear people's opinions on that. And thank you for the calls this year. There will be loads more regular listener call-ins next year in 2025, or this year in 2025, depending on when people may be listening to this.
Yes.
So thanks for the call, and best of luck. Have a happy holidays.
You too. Thank you so much.
Joining me on the line now, all the way from Rochester, New Hampshire, I've got Regis. Regis, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Andy. I really appreciate you and your podcast quite a bit.
No, thank you. And you've got a wonderful voice for this kind of thing, so I'm jealous of that.
Thank you.
Listen, Regis, the floor is yours. What is it you want to talk about, mate?
Well, I sent you an email and I went over some things. I don't know if you have it up or not.
I've got it right in front of me.
Okay. So I think one of the things that I mentioned, talk about NHI, and I've been following the subject for a long, long time since I was a kid. Like I said, I'm going to turn 60 on Monday. And yeah, we're definitely not alone. We've never been alone. But I think, one thing that you don't hear about is I'll just say, I'll say NHI. Any NHI that's observing this planet has it mapped out down to the square inch, whether it's land or sea. Just my opinion. They know every inch of this planet, and they know everything that's going on militarily. It's just one angle you never really hear about. The other angle that I think about. These are the things that I think about when I'm driving or at work.
Yeah.
One of them is I am sure that NHI understand every single language on this planet. They probably don't get the slang in languages, but I'm sure they have every social media, every broadcast. I mean, every type of communications. I'm sure they have their own AI that monitors all of this. I mean, what is your thought on that?
Cool. So you taught me some slang, wicked pisser, just before. So yeah, you, you're probably right. They don't get the Boston slang or a lot of the Glaswegian stuff anyway. So working from the first point, the mapping thing is interesting. I've always referenced Chris Mellon on the Unidentified TV series. He went to see David Marler, David Marler, UFO researcher, investigator, author on the Black Triangle books. He's coming back on the podcast soon to talk about his work with the files that he's curating out there. But I always remember Mellon saying to Marler that he felt black triangles were mapping the Earth, and it was a surveillance and mapping, ordnance survey, whatever that may be. So that could make sense. Have they access to everything? So again, I suppose this is something I asked one of the previous callers, Regis. What's your overall view on what is happening in terms of UFOs in general first? Because when you say, are you talking about one species or multiple species, or what do you think?
I'm talking about all of them combined, because based upon the different types of craft we are seeing, I think it is different civilizations. I don't want to say species. I don't like using that term, but civilizations that are visiting us and monitoring us, and they see everything that is going on.
Do you think they know about each other and they are in
Oh
conjunction
yeah,
with each other, or is it separate, organizations almost? But you know how you can have multiple parts of a company doing different research on one thing?
I think they know. I think whether they communicate, I mean, who knows? But I'm sure they all know that they are aware of each other.
Hmm.
You get to a point where you can come to a planet. I mean, who knows how they're getting here? Whether it's anti-gravitic, it's through wormholes, through interdimensional. They all know. If you're at that point, you're very aware of what's the civilizations around you. It's like when you you go back 500 years, nobody knew where this country was or that country was until, technology, until ships, and, then if that makes any sense.
No, it does. So essentially you're saying from those points that these species or entities or whatever they may be, they know us down to a T. They know the planet. They know what we have. And is that in terms of our military industrial complexes, weapons, transport? They understand our language through whatever kind of interface they would use. So then I would ask you, to what end do you think they've done that level of studying?
I think it's so they can really keep an eye on us to see what point we're at. And I think the reason why we're seeing this massive increase in sightings of, of orbs, drones, nobody, that one orb, it almost looked like a bluish metallic that the picture of it is on the runway. And I think that's in England. I don't know if that's
Manchester Airport from this summer. Yeah.
That, you look at that and it's like, there's no way that's fake. There's just my opinion. So, that's a balloon. No, it's not a balloon. My point is, sorry, I got off track here.
No, that's okay.
My cat just told me I got off track too. So,
no, you're saying about those orbs.
Yeah,
and you're talking about that Manchester
I
Airport
think they're seeing everything. How close, quite frankly, how close we are right now to World War III. Where you used to be where the clock was 15 minutes to midnight, and now we're 90 seconds. To midnight.
At what point though do they step in then? Because this is the thing.
Maybe it's not their point to step in. That's the whole thing. I mean, maybe do they step in, or are they just observing, or are they going to show their presence and hopefully? I don't know. Maybe they could have a prime directive. I know I'm talking Star Trek, but I'm sure they have something there's a reason why they're not landing, because personally they probably don't even care. They probably think we're pretty primitive. We're a violent world. We're a violent planet. We're always warring. So I think maybe if it gets down to the point where there are exchanges, nuclear exchanges or maybe you would see something very dramatic. But at this point, I think, but more of them are being seen, and they're being seen everywhere. It's not just the United States; it's all over the world now. Japan, China, but the information you'll get out of China about this would be, who knows,
minimal,
minimal, and probably some of it's suspect. But you're seeing it South America, North America, East Coast, West Coast, Europe. I'm sure Russia, same thing. I can imagine what they're seeing there.
Are you far from these sightings of drones yourself and orbs?
Yeah. I mean, New Jersey, where this stuff. New York for me is about a 5-hour drive, 5-hour drive. So, but I know they've been seen around Boston, and there's actually been sites down. I don't know if you ever heard of Salem, Massachusetts.
I have, yeah.
Yep. I grew up near there, but there's actually been sightings of orbs. There was actually a video somebody took, and it got taken down, and there was 2 or 3 of them flying in a V formation. These things always seem to fly, so to speak, in a V formation, which I find interesting.
What's your take on that whole flap then? Because a few of the other listeners I've spoken to recently have said the same thing, and it's a big thing online. I've kind of spent a week not on social media too much, and I will be talking about the drone and orb stuff in the end of year breakdown and everything. But what's your take on what's happening right now?
I think something is going on with the government. I mean, everything is suspect. I think one thing, the U.S. government exceeds in is obfuscation. I hope I said that word right, but everything is like smoke and mirrors. You never really know what the heck is going on. I think something is going on, and they're seeing it. That's why you're seeing this presence, and you're seeing it all over the world. You're seeing it in Ukraine. Like I said, I'm sure it's being seen in Russia around their military bases. But the fact that they're focusing on military bases, it just there's something going on that we're not being told worldwide. That's just
I can agree with that. I think there's something. I think at this point, especially in the States where the volume seems to be larger, whatever these objects are, of which many of them appear to be drones.
Yeah.
I imagine they know at least by this point what those are. However, we'll find out soon enough. I mean, we've got the inauguration is it the 6th of January?
No, that's 20th.
20th, okay. So it's still a few weeks to go, but you've got that inauguration. If that dies down by then, or if this has been something that's been done because of that, or who knows, But I'd like to think at least by that point we'll have some kind of answer, or this just kind of fades away and fizzes out. But it has got people interested in the UFO subject. It has got people looking up. It has got people taking videos. To your point, I'd love to ask you though, what do you think going into 2025, Regis, are realistic expectations of what sort of progress we could get in the UFO topic? Are you thinking this is the year for full-blown disclosure, like some might tell you? Are you thinking something quieter or something in between?
I think it's going to be somewhere in between. I don't think it's going to. I think it will be whatever happens. Where when disclosure does happen, I think it's slowly. This is probably a sign where they're showing themselves, because I think part of some of this, the what we're seeing is NHI, and I think some of it is just military stuff. I think it's a kind of a show that's being put on by the military, trying to hide the truth. It's like the shell game, so to speak. But you know what, Andy, I hope that there is something, but my trust in the government, to telling the truth is not exactly, I don't know, how can I say it? I hope there's something, but I think whatever comes through is going to be. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here.
No, that's okay.
I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be very eye-opening, and even when something is, say they just show themselves, there's going to be a lot of people out there saying, no, this isn't this. This is all, this is the military. You're going to have the deniers saying, no, this is not this. This is not that. This is us, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I think it's going to take one big dramatic event. I don't think they're going to land on the White House lawn or at 10 Downing Street or wherever, because they probably don't care about that. It's for them. It's a bigger picture of being seen.
Yep.
Yeah. If that makes sense to you.
Absolutely. No, it certainly does. Listen, and did I answer your points before? Was there anything else you wanted to bring up from the email?
I think what was the last? I can't remember what the last.
So your last one, if they were malevolent and wanted to do malicious acts, they could just render all satellites useless.
Yeah, if NHI were malevolent and they wanted to do something, let's face it, all they got to do, like I said, all they have to do is take out all of our take out all the satellites, render them useless, and that plunges us back to what would you say? Probably the 50s, early 50s.
Oh, easily, yeah.
And actually even worse, because most people don't even have landlines now. And even the landlines are all connected via satellite.
A lot of the technology, a lot of that technology we would have relied on or used then and been used to, a lot of folks wouldn't even have access to now. So you're right. You'd probably be going back even further than that. Yeah,
I think it would. Because you wouldn't even have the ham radio operator, ham radio operation, you have CB. But yeah, if they were going to do something, that's all, and they know it. Look at look at all the junk we have up there. All they have to do is just take everything out, and I'm sure they could. Maybe not all at once, but they could take it out, render it useless for whatever time period. Kind of like in The Day the Earth Stood Still, which I think is one of the best science fiction movies ever, and very poignant on this topic, where he stops whatever. He lets planes land and he stops power. You couldn't start your car, you couldn't do anything for a certain period of time, and maybe that's something that it would take for this planet to wake up.
Yeah, but I like it. Listen, awesome, Regis, great call. Really appreciate that. And can I just say, very happy birthday for Monday when it comes?
Oh, Wednesday. Thank you very, very much.
Wednesday. Okay, yeah. I'll make a note. Wednesday. I'll send you a Wednesday email to say happy birthday.
Thank you very, very much, Andy. Sorry if I rambled.
No, listen, that's what the listener call-ins are for. It's a good ramble. It should be called the ramble, but there we go. Awesome, Regis. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
That is all for this episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. Don't forget to leave the podcast a review on your chosen platform. Apple and Spotify do make a huge difference to the algorithm. If you're checking the show out on YouTube, please don't forget to like and leave a comment on here as well. Any sharing you do is very much appreciated on any social media platform. And finally, you can listen to shows ad-free and sponsor-free in their glorious full versions by subscribing for less than the price of a coffee on Apple, Spotify, just search That UFO Podcast Premium. YouTube, you can sign up and be a member, or you can do that through Patreon.com. Thank you very much for listening, folks.
It wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer, more like a hubcap designed by Chaucer, a little baroque and quite steampunk, like Alice was playing bass for the Parliament of Folk. The little fucker hovered right outside of my window, and when I shoved out the screen, he made it an issue. I don't think he expected me to see his ass, but I'd had some champagne and smoked.